Hello, it's great to see all of you again. I'm Lana Kay, and today we'll be discussing Kentucky's worst disaster our state has ever known. The fire at the Beverly Hills Supper Club, May 28, 1977, Kentucky's worst tragedy. With us, we have author Robert Webster. Welcome to the program, Bob.
Thank you so much.
So
good to being here.
It's so good to have you. It's so good to have you with us today. Now, Bob has tirelessly worked on this book for over 5 years. It is a thorough, and I mean thorough, account of the history of the club, complete with important pictures, a timeline of events leading up to the evacuation of the club, the aftermath, survivor stories. It is a work of great importance to the history of our state, and it is an all-inclusive account. So, Bob, you have written 2 previous books.
Yes.
You are also a very active member of the Kenton County Historical Society.
Currently president.
Oh, you're currently president. Great. So you have a love for history.
I do.
You won some awards on your previous works. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Bob, what piqued your interest? The Beverly Hills Country Club fire.
Well, actually, I just finished a book on local theaters, neighborhood theaters that we have in Northern Kentucky. They're all gone now. But one of the former employees there, David Brock, contacted the Kenton County Public Library looking for a local history author, and fortunately found me. He basically asked, would you be interested in writing another book? I said, well, not really. I know how much I get paid writing local history books, so I just finished one. But I was intrigued. Well, what did he have in mind? But he had an incredibly different story than I had ever heard with the Beverly Hills. And I mentioned to him, I said, well, that sounds really great. Sounds like a great book, but I don't write fiction, so unless you've got something to back up some of what you're saying. And short story, within 3 months, I was hooked into finding as much information as I could. Clearly, when we got to the Kentucky State Police files, nothing was matching what was in the local newspapers, what people had been told for 25, 30 years.
Wow.
So I was hooked, yes.
So it's very different. It's very different than what the press said, what we learned at the time.
Yes.
These are, and Bob, I want to say this because I appreciate that he has footnoted, he has referenced, everything is referenced, and especially with history, and I belong to Boone County Historical Society, and I'm just going to say there are too many people that are too loose about writing historical books, and if it's not true, it's not history. So I appreciate so much the time he took, and the references are long on many I mean, just that in itself was quite a feat to list everything that he had explored. So,
well, and it's important to know that there's a lot of information that we discovered that is not in the book because there are certain people, I won't mention their activities, but if they won't allow me to use their name and quote them, then I can't use the information that they gave me.
That's right. And that's being a very thorough and good researcher. So now, Bob, what surprised me was you research much history of the local clubs of the day. This is Newport and Alexandria, Alexandria Pike. And many have the owners you research, the mafia ties. And why was that history, and it is, so important to the reader?
Well, as I'm going out talking and speaking about this particular event, I find true that there are many, many generations coming along now that 30 years old and younger that have no idea of the history of Newport, Covington, the mob connections and things. So for me to try to tell these people that this was not a aluminum wiring fire event, this was absolutely arson. I had to spend 2 chapters explaining what was going on in northern Kentucky in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
And it made it so interesting, and you wouldn't believe the arson that went on. And
Absolutely.
So then this wasn't such a surprise when you get to the Beverly Hills after you've read this. It was just so great. Now, Bob, I've read the book, of course. I was at Beverly Hills many times. This was my dating era, the 70s. Dionne Warwick, Frankie Valli.
Sure.
I really can't remember them all, but it was wonderful. For you that don't know, it was glamorous. We were all dressed up. The girls wore long evening gowns. I mean, it was a high-class, beautiful chandeliers. It was grandeur. It was really, really wonderful. So I've been weddings in the garden room, very familiar with the cabaret. And so that was the big showroom.
Sure.
So Bob, the book is so extensive, and I've read it, and I visited Beverly Hills, that I want you to really tell us what the important things for our viewers to know, rather than me hit facts that you'd rather mention something else.
Yeah, well, even today, I find interesting that I talk to people, I know all about the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire. I remember it like it was yesterday. The Shillings had all the exit doors locked. It was grossly overcrowded. There was no sprinkler system. There was a delay in notifying the authorities. People remember that because it was in the newspaper the first 3 or 4 days after the fire.
Yes, it was.
It was true that there's no sprinkler system, but none of the other things were actually accurate. The place was crowded, absolutely, but the cabaret room was built for 1,000 and had 1,051 people that were accounted for in that room. So grossly overcrowded? Absolutely not. The only doors that were chained and locked were exit doors that were no longer used as exit doors. They couldn't have been found by the public, and as a matter of fact, the people in the cabaret room would have had to walk through the fire to get to those doors. No one died as a result of locked exit doors. Now, many people died as a result of inadequate sized doors. They were certainly up to building code at that time, but one in particular are waiter doors, where you push on the right-hand door and you can get out easily, but pushing on the left-hand door, it opens the opposite direction. So that was the major problem in the cabaret room that caused so many deaths. But all of the reports that came out the first week after the fire, most were inaccurate. As a matter of fact, the Courier-Journal, the leading newspaper in the state, said the fire started in the kitchen, when there was actually no damage done to the kitchen whatsoever.
No, they walked through the kitchen to get...
Any reporter that would have just glanced into the kitchen would have seen that
the kitchen wasn't torched.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so the club was very large. Tell them the capacity of the whole club.
Well, there was about 2,500 people.
Can you imagine?
There. So it was a huge place. There were 4 weddings going on that day. There were 2 Greyhound buses that came up from Ashland, Kentucky, with mostly senior citizens. There was a Greyhound bus full of people from Dayton, Ohio. So there was certainly a large crowd expected that evening. Dave Brock, I mentioned before, and I'll mention Tom McConaughey. He's the other person
Your
that I list
researcher.
as a co-author. But certainly without Dave, there would be no story. But he actually was in charge of setting up some of the tables and chairs in the rooms. He got there early that morning. And when he went into the zebra room, which was the smallest room, only held about 25 people, there were maintenance workers on ladders working in the ceiling. Didn't really surprise him much. We saw maintenance people in the club all the time. But he simply asked, what are you doing? How long are you going to be working here? And they told him they were working on the air conditioning. And he went about his business setting up the other tables and chairs. Checked on him 2 or 3 times, finally got a little irate. I need to set up this room. And they finally got out of there. But that was the first hint that there was something suspicious going on. It was after the fire that he realized, wait a minute, everyone is saying that the fire started in the zebra room. Has anyone ever talked to these maintenance men? And it was about 3 months after the fire that he confronted the Shillings and said, has anyone ever talked to them? And they said, well, what maintenance men? We haven't had anyone scheduled for work in months. And he said, well, they told me they were working on the air conditioning.
Wow.
And Mr. Shilling said, Dave, there's no air conditioning units in the ceiling of the zebra room. So those men clearly should not have been there. There's nothing in the Kentucky State Police files to mention anything about these maintenance men. Actually, it wasn't until the 30th anniversary when a lot of other employees got together for a big event, first responders, families of the victims. It was a major event that Dave realized that there were other employees that saw the same people he saw, and that's what really started this new investigation. Of course, we have gone to the state of Kentucky, but they are reluctant to reopen this at all. they cite money. It would cost millions to hire new investigators to consider this arson, but certainly all the information is there. We have no doubt in our minds that the fire was arson. We named the people that we believe did it. We know how they accomplished it. The Kentucky State Fire Marshals pointed out items in the basement that was the main cause, although the state police say they look elsewhere. But incredibly, aluminum wiring wasn't ever brought up until several months later when it went into a civil trial situation.
That's what we all thought.
Absolutely.
And it was their fault. This wiring went bad.
Right.
Okay. So do tell us about the zebra room, and then as it started just smoldering.
It was about 2 minutes till 9 that evening, the Saturday evening. 2 minutes till 9 that the zebra room was actually vacant at that time. It was a small wedding reception that had vacated about 8:30. But two waitresses went in there to look for tray stands for another event, and they saw smoke lingering at the ceiling. They immediately notified the club owner. The Fort Thomas Police Department was called. They immediately started evacuating the club. There was no delay whatsoever. But unfortunately, there was never any flames for quite some time. The employees and owners went into this zebra room with fire extinguishers hoping to put out the small fire, but it was actually burning in the walls and in the ceiling. Of course, they didn't know that. But once the zebra room, Empire room, the Viennese rooms, some of those rooms were vacated, smoke finally started pouring out of that room and hindered some of the evacuation of the Empire room and also the upstairs. There were about 100 people trapped upstairs for quite some time. Wayne Dammert, another hero of the fire, was solely responsible for getting some of those people out the back hallway.
Most of those people out, yes.
So there were only 2 deaths from the second floor that evening. Of the 165 total.
And I think he tried to rescue them, and it was too hot.
Absolutely. He went.
They were in the dressing
rooms.
He
actually commandeered a ladder off the first fire truck that arrived. I'm sorry, the second fire truck. Climbed up onto the roof with one of the firefighters and tried to get to those people that he thought might be in those dressing rooms, and just could not do it.
Oh.
But once flames broke out of the zebra room, raced down a hallway, which we now believe was wiped with an accelerant. The flames reached the cabaret room's main entrance, forcing everyone to go out the emergency exits, and that's where the problem arose. Walter Bailey, obviously all the employees were heroes that night. They're all responsible for helping people get out.
They were so brave.
Of 2,500 people,
it's a lot of people.
Were
that
killed,
would really, it's a small statistic when you think of what could have happened.
Absolutely.
Had they not been so brave and stayed behind, many of them to assist.
Absolutely. Very few employees left. They all stayed there to make sure their guests.
They felt it was their obligation to help.
Yeah, I had so many tell me I had to get my people out. I had to get my people out. So they felt that personalization with it. But Walter Bailey was a 16-year-old busboy. He is the one that actually went to the stage of the cabaret room, took the microphone from the comedy duo of Teeter and McDonald, who was the warm-up act for John Davidson that evening, and very calmly said, "There's a small fire on the other side of the building." At that time, he had seen no flames, no smoke, whatever. He was, taking for granted what he heard was true. He could be evacuating the entire cabaret room for a small fire that had already been put out, for all he knew.
At 16 years old.
Yes, and certainly would have gotten fired.
What do you make of, and that had to run through his mind. What do you make of him taking that responsibility?
Well,
I think it may be some kind of divine intervention.
I don't know if I could have done that at 16.
I know
would have been
I
worried.
couldn't have.
If I clear everyone out of here that just ordered their drinks and just paid for the show, and I tell them all to leave.
When you hadn't seen any flames and not, nothing really big had happened.
No clue whatsoever that
it's just remarkable that he did that.
But unfortunately, of the 1,000 people in that room, most of them were not paying any attention to the warm-up act. They were there to see John Davidson. They had just sat down with their family and friends and, small talk. So they never heard the announcement. Of the ones that did hear the announcement, most of the survivors told us that they actually thought he was part of the comedy routine. and only about 1/3 of the room immediately stood up and gathered their belongings and went to an exit. Of course, those people had no difficulty whatsoever getting out. But when you still have 600, 700, 800 people that are trying to get out 2 small exit doors,
it turns into...
It's just not going to work.
Okay, so Bob, you're saying to us that, it came out, then it finally built up as so much combustion that it did come out of that zebra room.
Yeah.
Now, what about, and you think an accelerator, and it roared down that long hallway, and the people that went, it's a very long hallway because we'd wait in line to get into the cabaret room. So you remember standing there before you entered the big room. So, Bob, why not flashover, as they call it? Why couldn't it have just been that? Did it go too fast?
It simply went too fast. There were 2. One was a retired Cincinnati fire captain, Pete Sabino, who just happened to be there that evening. And from his 30 years of experience or whatever it was at that particular time, he tells us that, and he told the authorities, there was no way that was a natural burning fire. He saw that fire race down the hallway. He was on his hands and knees with a busboy trying to get other people out. But the way that fire raced down the hallway, he has no question in his mind that there was an accelerant used on those walls of the hallway. That's why it raced down so quickly and cut off that main exit from the cabaret room within seconds.
And earlier in the day, people were seen supposedly cleaning.
Yes. At that time, they thought they were cleaning, but we actually interviewed the daughter of some of the people involved that she says was wiping an accelerant. We even know what chemical was likely used, again, based on some of these gangsters that contacted me that I can't use their name.
Yes.
But at any rate, we have pretty reliable sources of exactly what was going on that evening.
That is so, isn't this amazing after all the time, it was the Schellings. Okay, do you hold the Schellings culpable?
Well, I certainly believe there are things that they could have done better. Did they meet all the fire codes? No, but technically no one died as a result of fire code violations. For instance, the beautiful spiral staircase, which you recall,
yes,
was supposed to have metal doors at the bottom and top, which would completely destroy
the
beauty
ambiance
of
the whole of our entering.
Absolutely. But, when the fire raced down that hallway, it didn't race up the spiral staircase to begin with as quickly as the fire code would have implied.
But did it then, when it got up to the crystal rooms, did it trail? Is that
yes.
The path that took
up
it?
It actually took 3 paths, one into the main bar, and which would cut off the main entrance to the building, and then up the spiral staircase, and then down the long hallway.
To the cabaret.
It very quickly, when it burst out of that zebra room, it went 3 directions very, very quickly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I will mention this to the viewers. I think it's extremely important. As I mentioned, the fire technically started around 5:30, 6 o'clock that evening. It was burning in the walls and into the ceiling, and actually went from the basement all the way to the ceiling of the 2nd floor before it started burning down. It wasn't until almost 9 o'clock when it became noticeable inside the building. But between 5:30 and 6:30, 13 people later told authorities that they were driving up the driveway to the event and saw smoke coming out of the roof of the building. None of those 13 people said anything to staff, the club staff at all, which one person could have saved 165 lives.
Yes, because had they walked out and said that's
unusual.
Right.
Yeah, most people said, well, we thought it was coming from the kitchen, or we thought it was a chimney, or we thought they didn't make any importance of it.
And Bob, it is in retrospect that we realize now. At that time, I have questioned myself so many times, knowing, so well how I was sitting in that cabaret room. And when Walter Bailey made it, would I have had the good sense to get up? Now, after this fire, sure. Anytime you even think there could be a fire,
sure.
You get out of there.
Sure.
Because this was so horrific.
Absolutely.
But I have wondered many times. Now, tell me, were there still... And I know people, you'll have to tell us there was Panamanian in that
Absolutely.
room, because they were, and the book is so extensive and so well written that he even explores how people react in a fire.
Sure.
The panic, and you say, really, it's a normal.
It is. There's something called a
to-
flight or flee response, and it's about half and half. Some people will stay and do whatever they can to help their fellow man, and half of the people will get the heck out of there. But you're right in that comment that you made. You know, even people today that if they were in that fire, if they remember that fire, still today, if they go to a restaurant or a theater,
I start looking.
There's the one exit, there's the second exit, there's the third exit.
That is so
and
right.
We never did that before.
No, we never worried about it. But boy, after that, it got your attention.
Yeah. But I agree with you. If I were there, you know, I paid good money back then. That was good money for my dinner and show.
Yes.
Am I going to give up this good seat?
Right.
Because someone says there might be a fire?
Because now we've got to go out, and will we get it again? And
I'm not giving up my good seat.
That's right. And
a lot of people said that.
And Bob, back then, the DUIs and all weren't so terrible as then, and everybody had 2 or 3 drinks, you know, waiting for the show, and then through the show. I mean, this is what going to Beverly was a big part of. So, and then again, that sort of, you know, takes away your senses, your good sense. I mean, it just makes you more. It can't be that bad. Especially no flames.
No flames
or
nothing. Smoke
or
at
smoke.
that time in the cabaret room.
We just would have thought, well, it can't be that bad.
Now, people don't realize how long that hallway was.
Oh,
but,
it's long.
You could have a raging fire at the other end of that building and
never
no
know it sitting in there. Okay, so Bob, now let's see. What did I want to? It's so important that I try to get everything in. As it raced down, as it roared in, it races down, it goes out 3 ways, and it races down the long corridor, and then it enters the cabaret. Then was that
Then there's panic. Well, there was a service hallway to the east of the cabaret room, and that quickly filled with smoke before or about the same time it started entering the room. So some of the people that were going out the emergency exit on the east side, which the banquet captain there was able to set the waiter doors so they both opened into the hallway. Everyone on that side of the room at least made it into the hallway if they didn't get outside. But once the power went off and once that hallway darkened with smoke,
I can't imagine.
There were people that were less than 3 feet away from the exit door and had no idea where they were. Some people opened the door to the backstage area. Their bodies were found there. And unfortunately, 12 people opened a door that led into a closet. They thought that was the door out, and their bodies were found there. On the other side of the room, however, it was far worse. The doors there were not set, so people were pushing on both doors, and of course they wouldn't open. They were not locked. They just are made to open the opposite direction.
And then
they were overcome with smoke. They would fall to the ground. People would fall on top of them.
Start.
When firefighters were finally able to get in from the outside to those doors, there were bodies stacked chest high, and some people were still alive. They were pulling people off there just to try to get into the room. So unfortunately, that's where most of the bodies were located.
Okay.
But the pandemonium, I mean, we have reports from survivors that say that there were people jumping on tables and jumping from table to table, running through there, which, of course, all of that caused more problem, but you're going to do whatever you can possibly do
to get out of there in your flight or fight, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Bob, tell us now, we're getting toward the end here of our time. I want you to tell us about, this is so wonderful because 169, it becomes a statistic in your head. That's bad, you know, but he lists the victims in the back and also their families. Many went. Was that really hard?
Well, I was probably halfway through the book when I realized I really need to do a chapter just on the families. People don't realize these were your neighbors, your friends down the street, your relatives, of course, your babysitters. I mean, people don't realize there were 53 children orphaned that night, which was some of the worst, hardest interviews that I had. I talked to a 14, at that time she was 14 years old. She was at Grandma and Grandpa's house with her 9-year-old son. She certainly was old enough to know what was going on. She was sitting on the couch with Grandma and Grandpa watching, knowing that Mom and Dad was at the Beverly Hills Supper Club, staying up till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Mom and Dad never did return. And that was horrific to interview her. But you also had people that, here's your 19-year-old babysitter. that calls you and calls her parents and says, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith haven't come home yet. And
What shall I do?
The parents are saying, well, it's because of this, honey. And she's scrambling. They're trying to find phone numbers for other relatives because Mom and Dad are both gone. I mean, it's tremendous.
This is the personal side of this. Yeah. One girl, is it Tyra? Tyra, she left with her whole family, and she's the only one. It was her mom, her aunts, her sister. I mean, this was I cannot imagine.
Several cases where you have a group of 10 or 12 people with maybe 1 or 2 or 3 survivors. And of course, you have, as I mentioned, you know, both parents, of course, went to the event and both
together.
But you see that a lot, and I thought it was important to put that in the book. It was, you know, you wanted to see, you know, why these people were there, who they were there with, whether it was celebrating an anniversary or it's just a special dinner out. There was a retirement party for a school teacher up in Ohio that killed almost the entire teaching staff of a school in Ohio. It's tremendous how this affected the entire region.
Well, and then you say thousands when you really reach out to friends, and as it spirals down, we're all affected from this fire, and just some more than others, and it is terrible.
And the death toll officially at 165, but 169 includes. It was later determined that unborn fetuses would be included in the death toll, so it's truly 169. But we have at least 3 employees, former employees that survived the fire but committed suicide. There was one gentleman that drove in from Indianapolis to identify his daughter's body. He died of a heart attack in his car on the way back home. So, I mean,
it goes on and on.
It goes on and on and on.
It's so great, though, that you listed them. Before we go, I do want to just show you, for you that have never been to Beverly, it was a huge place. It was a beautiful place. We've talked about that. And I want to show you some pictures of John Davison. Was a big entertainer of the day. He would, and you know, he really, Bob, didn't do it for me. He was a little too cutesy, the dimples, the whole deal, and I'm so glad he didn't.
But,
for once, you know, he just didn't.
The blonde-haired, blue-eyed entertainer.
Yes, and he would. And now, you know, Bob, he lost his music director.
Yes, he did.
And
quite honestly, was never the same.
No, we never heard
fans
much.
of him say that he was never the same
after that fire. It was so. Can you imagine? You know, they came to see you, and it ended up in this terrible tragedy. So that would have to affect you.
And certainly one of the many heroes. He was seen by many people holding that east emergency exit.
Yes, he was.
So that people could get
yes,
out
he
instead
was.
of just getting out of there safely.
So for you that don't remember, this is who everyone came to see with that had tickets to the cabaret room. And beneath is Teeter McDonald. They were a very fun act of the time. They had puppets with them. And also Jeff Ruby says that he was there that night and led out his party. And he mentions that Teeter and McDonald had the dummies thrown over their shoulders, and it just looked like something, he said, surreal, you know, very strange. Okay, I have just a few more pictures before we go. I want you to enjoy or see these pictures, to try to imagine this beautiful room for you that have never seen it. And right now we're going to take a look at the cabaret room. Now, as Bob said, Bob, this is where most of the deaths were, and it is this beautiful. It had tiers. So as you rose above the grounds or the floor seats, you could see, everyone could see the show from all over. Of course, you know, the closer the better.
Sure.
But that is the cabaret room. Down that long hallway, as this accelerant and the fire, the accelerant on the walls and the fire zoomed down there and through those double doors. My God, I am so glad that, you know, because you'd never really get over it, Bob. Not really. I know Wayne Dammert has never really gotten over it. No. Now we have the spiral staircase. This was a gorgeous staircase. As you came in, it went up, as Bob said, and around, and then there was a waterfall beneath it or near it, and then it was just a beautiful club. Well, the showplace of the nation.
Correct.
It was called, Bob. So just a lovely, lovely club. And then we have one more, just so you can get a little, and Bob has many more pictures in here. We're not showing, you cannot